So now that we've shrunk the universe of contracts that we can talk about to one element, which is the statement of work, what you're looking to develop is a change in the sections and the structure of the work, as opposed to, say, a normal statement of work. And I'm going to show you those in a moment. You need to contract in this, and this is the most important piece because this is about governance over a description of services. You need to contract for how the work will be done, not what work will be done. And I want to say that again because it's a mindset shift that commercial teams, when you're procuring for Agile, need to think about. Is the statement of work focuses on how the work will be done, not what work will be done. The point of Agile is you're not defining everything up front to explain what the deliverables are by dates, because that's waterfall. So more effort has to go into a consensus as to the process of doing the work, like a 2-week sprint, than actually articulating the work. And that can feel so uncomfortable to go to that phase as either a buyer or a seller. But that's a necessary break in how we're thinking about how you are contracting for a service.
So it's really important that Agile statements of work and contracts manage the same risks that a normal or traditional statement of work wants to manage. They're going to manage the risk that it overruns, the risk that you don't get the right outcome. You want to manage the reward that both parties are going to get. You want to manage disputes and exit. All of those same things need to be managed, but they're managed in different ways. So in a traditional statement of work, there's a big emphasis on scope and deliverables, and the scope will be the entire scope of the whole project and all the deliverables from the whole project. Whereas in an Agile statement of work, one way they can manage that is by having micro statements of work, if you like. So if you look at that government deal that Jamie was mentioning, or the framework that Jamie was mentioning, they have monthly statements of work with micro deliverables and micro scope, and that scope can change. So there's an agreement in the contract and in the statement of work that scope can change, and that's obviously an important and necessary difference between a waterfall project and an Agile project. So these are just some of the things you might see in addition to sections that you're used to seeing in a statement of work or in the contract, depending on how you do that multi-tiered contract. You might see the product vision that we talked about earlier, the user stories. You might, and we're talking about high-level user stories at this point because obviously it hasn't been broken down. You might have a high-level backlog or a backlog approach. So how is the backlog going to be decided upon? The Agile framework, as Jamie said, there's lots of different flavors. Agile is a kind of umbrella term, and so you might have that detailed in more detail there. Importantly, the roles, who's going to be doing what and what expertise do they have, so that you can agree on what the team is going to be and whether they're equipped to do this work adequately, because it is actually a very difficult and challenging process. And a definition of done. So how will you know when something is ready to be shipped, when something is ready to go live? And acceptance criteria, how's that going to be decided upon? How is testing going to take place? Obviously, you've got your usual commercials, and termination and exit in Agile is really, really important, because obviously at the end of those sprint cycles, or when the client feels they've got enough value out of the contract, they do want to be able to terminate. These are what we're going to send you, which are our 9 key Agile statement of work questions. And I know that some people on the call will be very familiar with this idea of us asking questions, because discussion is absolutely essential to how we feel you get to a good statement of work. You ask questions. We suggest that everybody who's coming to a microscope meeting, or everybody who's going to discuss how this work takes place, can actually have a look at these questions in advance of a meeting, so they start to think about the answers they're going to need to have ready. I don't expect you to read all these now. We'll send them out to you so you can have a look. But they're basically some of the 9 questions that we feel are going to need to be answered through the statement of work. So it's great, especially for the business, if the business aren't familiar with Agile, for them to just have a think about that before they come to the meeting.